On April 16th, the Securities and Exchange Commission filed a complaint against Goldman Sachs and Company and one of its employees, Fabrice Tourre. The suit alleges that Goldman Sachs created a synthetic housing market bond that was sure to fail, sold the bond to customers, and then conspired with a short seller to bet against it. Could this one bond and the people involved have triggered the collapse of the financial markets and one of the worst recessions in recent history, all while Goldman Sachs posted record profits? Richard, what do you think?
Well, you know,
I'm amazed that was just filed.
I was amazed the SEC actually got off its duff to decide to do something.
I was really amazed too.
You know, because basically they kind of sit there and look the other way. Well, because most of the folks that go to the SEC are from, guess where? The banking industry. I'm Henry Paulson, a perfect example. It reminds me of The Sopranos in a way. You know, I hate to say that, but it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like theater of life stuff whereby you're betting against yourself because, you know, greed is the motivation, not, you know, keeping the company solvent. I don't think that Goldman Sachs alone was responsible for the worst recession. I think it was the great banks colluding because they knew they could get away with it because the SEC wasn't doing anything. There was no enforcement to say, you know, these derivatives, nobody understands them, and so what's going on here? But Goldman Sachs definitely was a player in the whole, you know, housing market business, and they really didn't care because there was no common sense invested. It's that one course that MBAs don't take anymore. It's called common sense. And you'd think that bankers would at least have some of that left over, but they're going to get what they deserve, I think.
So I read the entire complaint, and there are pieces of emails in there from Tourre and other people back and forth, you know, basically saying that they knew exactly what they were doing when they fabricated this, and that they also let Paulson help pick what was going to be in this package, and then he bet against it. So
Paulson's never going to go down for this, trust me.
Paulson's name is everywhere, but he's not actually being charged.
Plausible deniability.
Right.
This Fabrice Tourre fellow, he was something of a whistleblower, and it seems to me that the likely scenario is that he was indicted because they think he will try to cut a deal for immunity and then blow the whistle on people higher up the line.
That's probably what they're going to do.
This all started so long time ago, though. I mean, there were efforts to reform the housing market in Congress back in 2003. Right. Fannie Mae was out of hand. Some people thought that it was going off a cliff, and many of the senators in Congress said absolutely not. In fact, Barney Frank was quoted as, he said Fannie Mae and Mac are not in any kind of financial crisis. He said that. He was quoted as saying that just before the balloon was burst. And he was getting big money from the financial industry for his re-election bids. So it was a lot of blame in Congress to go around. But I think this Fabrice Tourre guy is going to be given immunity, and I think he's expected to name names and help the government get behind who really is responsible.
But there's a saying that you put horse manure in the corner of the church to keep the flies off the bride. And the bride in this case, I think, is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And what's the other? There's one other that is involved in something, because they're moving right along. Sallie Mae. And I was watching CNBC today. They're still bundling things to sell with 3% down. And there was a sale today of a package of super loans, and I think those are over 600, 700,000 on residential places. But it was all of them had over 20% equity. Most of them had from 50 to 60%, and they were selling today, so they don't know what they came in at. But that indicates to me that the private sector is paying attention and not making the kind of loans that they made before, so we won't have that junk for a while.
Oh, it's cyclical. You'll have it again because...
But why aren't they solving the problem with Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac, or vice versa.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the government program, and if they keep moving down there and the housing market eases up a little bit, they're doing nothing to make that better.
Well, the big banks that got all the bailouts paid them back awfully early. One, they didn't have to pay them back as quick
Those
as
that
they
could,
did. And so, and at the time, that one of the things that did happen and made the recession greater is that they stopped lending entirely. They took all that money, hoarded it, and didn't let it out. And businesses were crying for capital because they have to improve their, building or structures or whatever. And the minute you dry up that capital, you have to lay off employees.
But part of it was that the capital requirements imposed on the banks increased. So at the same time they're giving money to the banks and telling them to loan, they're also requiring how much capital they have on hand. So banks are kind of whipsawed in this, and I think many of them were afraid and reporting to investors, wanting to make sure that whatever they did loan was entirely safe and well secured.
I am pleased to see Freddie and Fannie thrown into the conversation, because you had suggested in your question what was the culprit in the collapse of our financial markets. First of all, financial markets collapse or go down
I knew it was more than
on a
we all
regular
know
basis.
it's not just one thing.
What makes
right?
them really bad, though? Okay, government ineptitude is usually the accelerant on the fire of a normal downturn.
Good
that
intentions
makes it not work. Now, 80 years ago, we had a fairly free market and a severe economic depression that everybody blamed on free markets. We have spent 80 years regulating the crap out of our financial markets. They're as highly regulated in removal from where they were in 1929 as they can possibly be. And yet here we go into another severe recession again. And what do people blame? Free markets still.
And now they want to go back and regulate everything.
No matter what, it's always the free market's fault. The SEC's been around for years. All of these watchdogs have been around years. When the free market fails, we have to get rid of the free market. When regulators fail, no one suggests we get rid of the regulators. They just say we need more regulators. We gotta up the ante. Now I want to talk about Goldman Sachs for a second. This is a behemoth firm, okay, whose business model for nearly 100 years has been to weave itself into the apparatus of government. So much of what Goldman Sachs does is not really free market. They underwrite bonds for all sorts of government projects. They are the most government-entwined financial organization on this planet, and they do it not just in the United States but all over. So I don't really have a lot of sympathy for them, and I'm sure they probably did something nefarious, but to single Goldman Sachs out as like the emblem of the free market is about as far removed from that reality as you can get.
They say Countrywide is next. They're going after that was what I read was that Countrywide was next on the list, and they were just going to start going down the list.
Well, and does anybody think that the SEC coming in was not a political move? And it may not have been engineered by the White House, but it came right on the eve of this financial reform that they want to do some people want to do on the national level.
Right.
And I think it couldn't have been a better time for that, because now they've got a big target. But there's going to be other companies that get involved, and they're solving a problem before they know exactly what caused the downturn. They have not looked at that close enough, so just throw a little bit on the wall and see if it sticks.
Prime example was Washington Mutual. Yeah, they got way overextended doing basically the same thing, putting out bad paper or loaning to people who they shouldn't have, loaned money to buy a house, and they were the nation's biggest thrift, I believe.
And they don't exist now.
They don't exist
Freddie
because
and Fannie still do. Chugging right along.
Chase gobbled them up, but it gave Chase a lot of indigestion because there was so much bad paper out there. So all the major banks were putting out bad paper because it was easy to do.
Well, but it wasn't just about it being easy. It was about the fact that the government had a program that required banks to make
Right.
subprime loans or to offer subprime loans, not just technically subprime, but to essentially lower the standards for
Yes.
who could qualify for home loans, a program that had been going on for a long time, but the ante kept getting raised because it was like, hey, we got home ownership to this rate, we can get home ownership a little bit higher if we just lower these standards. And so you take
I have to cut you off, so you gotta.
well, I was just going to say that
wrap it up.
this idea that somehow we just found greed on Wall Street is silly. The
No.
greed is always there, but when you get these sort of catastrophic failures, interesting enough, there's usually some kind of government action involved. There's no way
think it just triggered
this
him to talk
volume of this volume of loans could never have been made if the government weren't underwriting.
Encouraging, yeah.
So
Good
sure you would have had a
intentions.
downturn, but never as large as this.